Hello, and welcome back to the Be Productive podcast. Here we focus on the one thing approach and highlight a different area each week to help you transform how you view, set, and achieve your goals. Through our proven approach, we help you take your big dreams and break them down into smaller goals and activities. And through regular adjustments along the way, you can achieve anything that you want in life. Each week on the Be Productive podcast, we'll support you in keeping on track and motivated to achieve the goals that you've set for yourself. And I am Brooke Lehman, one of the many trainers and coaches here at The One Thing. I'm joined by Chris Dixon, our director of training. Want to say hi, Chris?
Hey, everybody. Thanks, Brooke.
Today, we're going to be talking about creating habits. As you might have noticed this month, we've been talking about habits quite a bit. But today we want to talk about what's getting in the way of actually forming those habits. So we know, and in the book, we talk about how it takes 66 days on average to form a habit. It could be longer than 66 days. It could be shorter, depending on the habit that you're trying to form. But this is why we, as a community and with our coaching clients and even with ourselves, we go on 66-day habit challenges, but it doesn't always work out. So, Chris, why do you think that people give up before they've actually established a habit?
I think it's important to acknowledge that when you're trying to form a habit, you're trying to change your behavior. And when you're trying to change your behavior, you need some support at times and you need to leverage different resources to your advantage to help set you up for success because the reality is that there's a lot going on in your life. Regardless of where you are and what you're doing, there's a lot of things happening. And day to day, to say yes to a new habit means you're going to have to say no to a bunch of other things. So, how do we set ourselves up and leverage resources, tools, and accountability to make sure that we can stay on track and consistently repeat this behavior over time?
Yeah, that's a great point. And 66 days doesn't seem like that long, but when you look at it, it kind of is. And there's like different periods that people go through throughout a journey of a 66-day habit challenge. And, from the excitement wearing off to something that we call habit boredom to enduring the monotony of success, there's different phases along the way. So, what are some of the tools that maybe can help us to get through the 66 days that we have here at The One Thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've got our 66-day challenge calendar, which is a wonderful way just to continue to remind yourself and give yourself a set of consistent behaviors around the habit that you're trying to form and to give yourself some accountability. And you can check that day off. It feels good. And over time, it starts to even be more about just keeping that streak going than the habit itself as that, new behavior starting to form.
Yeah, I love the story in the book. I'd actually heard this story before reading the book about Jerry Seinfeld, and somebody at one point had asked him how he got into being the comedian that he was, and he said, "I just wrote a joke a day, and I had a calendar, and every day that I wrote a joke, I put a red X on that day, and over time, it became less about doing the writing of the joke, and it became more about not breaking that chain because you see all those red X's." And you don't want a blank square. You want it to keep going. And so that's ultimately why the challenge calendar is really effective. And I'm not a paper person, so I really like to use some apps instead of our 66-day challenge calendar, which is if you're a paper person or you want to get a PDF on your computer and mark it off that way, I highly recommend it. But I use an app called Don't Break the Chain. Do you have any apps that you use, Chris?
Yeah, I have one that's called the habit tracker that
Mm,
I'll use whenever I'm trying to get started, especially. I just like the reminders. Like for me, just
yeah.
having a reminder just to keep it top of mind when everything else is happening and there's a million distractions. It just keeps that habit that you're trying to form at the front of your mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And even if you don't want to download a new app, you could create a reminder, just a daily reminder that pings you on your phone at whatever time makes sense for you to create that habit. So, digital,
Yeah.
paper, we got something for everyone.
Yeah, I think it's just so important to like orient yourself on like what are the bigger challenges that you personally face with or that you may face with the habit that you're trying to form and just ask like what are some things that you can get in position to just keep you on track. And I recommend the simpler the better, right? Life's already complex enough, but you just want like reminders, prompts, keep it at the top of your mind, like get yourself in an environment where you're likely to stay on track with your habits, and just think about what it is you're trying to do and like what's most likely to get in your way.
Yeah, and a lot of times I hear people say like, "Oh, I'm just so exhausted at the end of the day. I don't want to do that thing that I've committed to doing." Well, if that's the case, then find a different time. Try different times of the day. See if you want to do it in the morning or at lunchtime or whatever makes the most sense for you. If it's something that you can play around with, obviously. But I think some of the coaching clients I've worked with feel like they just want to give up if it doesn't work at the time that they committed to. So give yourself a little bit of grace and try different things, and eventually you'll find the time that works for you.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with if you're trying to form a new habit and seeing that you're not successful and you've gone a week and you've been really intermittent or spotty about being consistent day over day, just ask why. Figure out what's
Mm.
going on and then like a root cause analysis, if you will, on what's happening with you personally that's keeping you from achieving this consistency. And oftentimes it's what we call going smaller. What is the one thing you can do related to that habit to be more consistent, and then just keep asking that question till you feel like you've gotten to the nerve, if you will, at the center of it, and you're like, okay, that feels like a tiny enough domino that I could flick that day after day over time and be consistent. But oftentimes what I've experienced is when someone's trying to form a habit and they haven't really gotten to the root of what's keeping them from being consistent, that they struggle. They struggle. And sometimes it can be something as simple as just leverage some tools and resources for accountability. Something that for me, the habit tracker, it pops up on my phone the same time every day. And I'm like, okay, there it is. I remember. I would have forgot because I have 100 other things going on, but that's all I needed. And just asking yourself that question: what is the one thing you can do to be on track or be consistent with your habit?
Yeah. And you brought up accountability, not just accountability with ourselves, but I think another key factor in this is creating a system of accountability in your world. And I personally like to call them accountability buddies, but we talk about creating an accountability partnership. So, Chris, why is that important in establishing habits?
I think it's so important. I mean, it's I always find it fascinating that I'll ask myself these very simple questions to help give myself my own accountability, and I'll come up with answers in reflection, and then just having someone else ask me that same question, not even 24 hours later, how different the response is, and that's just what having an accountability partner can do for you. It just gives you that next level of accountability because somebody else asking you the question just gives you a different perspective, and then you knowing that you're going to have to show up and own whether or not you are keeping up with what you said you committed to. It's just a higher level of reinforcement, and I think so important.
Absolutely. And Chris, you're my accountability buddy. And we meet on a regular basis, and you hold me accountable to the things that I say I'm going to do. But who else might somebody enlist in their world to be an accountability partner?
I would say look at your sphere, like who's around you that would be consistent and that you could rely on to give you honest feedback and help hold you accountable. Because it's not only like having a person, but sometimes it's important to consider, are they the right person that you can depend on this side of things, and that you can find that in your sphere, or you can seek it out. And I think that's another really important option if you're looking for that even higher level of accountability, when you can hire someone that is their job is to provide that for you and they're good at doing it.
Yeah, and we're lucky because here at the One Thing we actually practice what we preach, and not only do we get to do this internally, but we get to help others as a coach to go through this process of being the accountability partner, and it is so rewarding. But if somebody isn't ready to jump in, to actually seek this out and pay for it, I recommend like Chris said, in your sphere. Like, it could be a close friend who maybe wants the same thing that you do. Maybe if your habit is around physical fitness, maybe there's someone who's a friend or a coworker, maybe even your spouse, that wants to do the same thing. And so you actually are holding each other accountable, not just a one-way direction. I also love the idea, if you have kids, to get your kids involved. I think Mark Donahue talks about how he brings his kids into the 66-day challenge and says, okay, we're going to mark this off every day that dad does this thing, and we're going to put it on the calendar. And after 66 days, we're going to go to Disney World, because they live in Florida. So they always get to go to Disney World. But are there any other ways, Chris, that you can think of to like get other people engaged and involved in your 66-day challenge?
I mean, you touched on it, but being specific, it's a community or a group of people that are like-minded that either they have a diverse set of goals. They don't always have to be aligned with yours in the same category, but are interested in that kind of accountability. Or if you want something more specialized, you could seek out a community that's focused around the same thing you are. For example, health or fitness or something along those lines, because then they'll have like-minded interests and maybe there's opportunities that are more specific to your needs. But I'd say at the very least, find a community of people who are interested in staying on a path to achieving goals. And then if you want to be specialized in that, you can.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I think we overlook the power of community when it comes to making behavioral changes within ourselves. And I'll just give a plug for our own community because our community is so awesome and we support each other. Even yesterday, there was a post in our community forum about changing their habit from one thing to another. So the conversations are going on, and I'm excited about our next 66-day challenge that's going to kick off at the beginning of June. So stay tuned for that. Chris, anything else that you'd add around tools and resources for creating habits today?
I mean, the last thing I'd say is, and it's commonly overlooked or undervalued, is the environment that you put yourself in. And
Mm,
just be conscious of, like, are you in an environment that will set you up to achieve the goals that you set and then ultimately stay consistent with the habits that you want to form? So don't overlook the importance of environment. And that could even be the environment inside of your own home or the place where you want to do this particular habit that will set you up for success.
yeah, it's a great point. All right, everyone. Well, thanks for taking the time to join us on this week's episode of the Be Productive podcast, where we transform how you view, set, and achieve your goals. We'll see you next time.